Hello, you're on the channel Infidelity and Revenge. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do it right now. Enjoy watching. No, of course not. It wasn't like that. It was a good fantasy, but it couldn't happen like that. The whole town would know that Steve was the father of my children, and I'd lose them in the divorce, and it would be unbearable for them to be known as Dolly's bastards. No, I had to be more subtle. And I did. Firstly, I visited a divorce lawyer I know a few times and worked with him to prepare some documents in case I needed them. Then I created the exact PowerPoint file I just described, but I didn't wait until the evening of Dolly's dinner to reproduce it. Instead, I set it up and prepared it for Dolly the evening 4 weeks before dinner. In the evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I called Dolly over. "Honey, I want you to come and look at the draft PowerPoint file I made for your talk next month." "Can't it wait, Jack?" she asked angrily. "I'm dead tired today." "No, honey," I said firmly. "I need to see what changes are required so I have time to make them. Please remember that I'm doing all this for you on my own time." That brought her into the study where I sat her down in front of the computer. "Just press the letter A when you're ready and the file will run on its own," I said, smiling to myself. I watched her closely. Everything was going well at first, and she practiced her remarks on the first few key slides of the society. Then she gasped, and her face went pale when she saw the still images of her and Steve. She turned to me, mouth wide open, but didn't make a sound. I just stared at her, expressing nothing. Then came the video clips of Steve and Dolly in various poses. By this time Dolly was desperately trying to stop the file, but I blocked it. Then the screen went out. It took about 2 minutes. Dolly sat slumped in her chair, her head down. She couldn't bring herself to look at me. I quietly savored every moment of her suffering. Finally she spoke, raising her head to look at me. In 5 minutes she had aged 20 years. "Jack, I don't. Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry." She started to cry. "I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgive you?" I asked coldly. "For what?" "Well, let's see. For having an affair with Steve Fisher that seems to have lasted the last 6 years we've been married. For letting him fuck you however he wanted and giving him the pleasures you always denied me. For giving him 2 children and letting me think they were mine. For laughing at me and speaking contemptuously of me behind my back. For denying me sex at Steve's insistence. Do you want me to forgive you for that?" She was sobbing even harder now. "Jack, I don't love him. You're the man I love, the man I've always loved." My anger was cold, restrained. I didn't say anything, but I thought, no, Dolly, this is rubbish. You love our life together, you love how I do everything for you, how I take care of the children, but you don't love me. No woman can love her husband and behave behind his back the way you do. I leaned back in my chair and let her cry. I was very pleased to see that, and I didn't say a word for the 20 minutes it took her to cry. Finally, she sobbed a few times. She wiped her face with her hands and looked at me. "What are you going to do, Jack? Are you going to divorce me?" "No, Dolly, I'm not going to do that," I lied. "I care too much about Marilyn and Brendan, even if they are other people's children." I let those words hang in the air for a moment, then continued. "But it's going to be very different here, you can rest assured. Let's start right now. Call that arsehole Steve and tell him to be here in 15 minutes. She looked at me in horror. "But I can't do that. He's at home with his wife and children. He's not coming." I smiled. "Say whatever you need to say, but get him here. You can tell him for me that if he doesn't show up here in 15 minutes, his marriage will be dissolved tomorrow." She looked at me, perhaps frightened by the coldness of my face. Then, without another word, she went into the kitchen and called for her lover. When Steve appeared, he gave me the soft, insincere smile I had expected. Dolly must have told him what had happened, and he looked worried and anxious. "Come into the study and sit down, Steve. You too, Dolly. There's something we need to talk about." As soon as we were seated, I began, "Okay, Steve, here's the thing. You've been sleeping with Dolly for a long time and making a fool of me. It's over now. Things have changed, and it's time for you to pay for it." He started to reply, but I cut him off. "Sit, watch and listen." I scrolled through the PowerPoint file and enjoyed seeing him aghast at what it contained. When the file stopped, there was a long, wonderful silence. I think I enjoyed it more than they did. "Now you will do exactly what I tell you to do, exactly what I tell you to do, or your happy marriage to Claire will come to a sudden and public end. Do you understand? Don't say a word, just nod your head." He nodded reluctantly, looking angry. "Good. Now listen to me and keep your mouth shut. I have a series of documents for you to sign. I'm going to hand them to you one at a time. You might want your lawyer to look them over, so I'm giving you 48 hours to return them to me, signed, or Claire will be invited for a little video review. The first one basically says that you acknowledge that you are the biological father of Marilyn and Brendan, and that you agree to pay child support for them until they turn 21, plus a lump sum for college. The amounts are right there, $10,000 per child per year, plus $100,000 each in the autumn of their first year of college. The money will be paid into a trust of which I am the sole trustee, and I am authorized to use it as I see fit for the needs of the two children." Steve jumped up from his chair in a rage. "Look, Jack, this is absurd. I have no intention of." I pushed him back in his chair. "Shut the fuck up, Steve. You've got money, and we both know it. This isn't your show anymore. It's mine, and you don't have a choice. Now shut up until I say you can talk." I saw Dolly looking across the room at me with a look of terror on her face. This was a side of her loving husband that she had not seen before. "The second document gives me your permission to adopt two children. You and Dolly will have to sign it. I'll ask her to do so after you return it to me. This third is a statement in which you permanently relinquish your parental rights to Marilyn and Brendan and swear never to reveal to anyone that you are their biological father. And lastly, a personal confession that you sexually harassed my wife in the workplace, forcing her to have an affair with you." "What?" Steve jumped up again. "That's a complete lie. She wanted it as much as I did." "Sit down, Steve," I said grimly. "Maybe so, but Dolly will still sign a sexual harassment complaint against you. It's one of my conditions for not divorcing her. Is that clear, Dolly?" I asked, turning to her. Dolly shifted her gaze from me to Steve with a startled look. She didn't say anything. "Let me explain," I said to both of them. "I'm not going to do anything with any of these documents. But it's my insurance, Steve, in case you ever think of abandoning your financial obligations to your two children. Or just in case it ever occurs to you that you'd like someone else to know who their biological father is." I held out to Dolly the sexual harassment complaint drafted by my lawyer. "Sign it, Dolly." Still looking frightened, she silently took the pen from my hand and signed the complaint at the bottom. "Now, Steve, we're almost done with your part of today's meeting. I expect these signed documents back in my hands within 48 hours. You can bring them here to the house. And if you ever get any dark, crazy ideas, like killing me, I assure you that several copies of your compromising notes and love notes to Dolly are in a safe place, and several people have been instructed to make sure they will definitely come to light if anything happens to me. Any questions?" I concluded, looking at him contemptuously. He stood up slowly, looking angry and frustrated. "You're a real son of a bitch, Jack, you know that." He headed for the door without even looking at Dolly. "Oh, not yet, Steve, we're not done yet." He turned to me. "You've been humiliating me with my wife for 6 years now. At first I thought I'd beat the shit out of you in 6 minutes, 1 minute for each year. But I realized I'd probably kill you by the end of it. So I'm going to do it in 60 seconds, just 10 seconds a year. Just a bit of pain after all that fun, you sneaky bastard." Steve stared at me, unable to believe I was being serious. He was a few years younger than me, as well as 2 inches taller and probably 25 pounds heavier. On the other hand, he was nowhere near as angry as I was. Dolly, get out of the room, I barked, close the door behind you. No, Jack, please, please don't do this. Without another word, I grabbed her arm, pushed her through the door and closed it. Then I turned to Steve. Feel free to defend yourself, Steve, if you can. When I approached him, he stretched his arms out in front of him in a defensive posture, looking at me with wide-open eyes. I gave him a quick right and left punch to his stomach, under his armpits, and he crouched in pain. I began to work on him, delivering a series of body blows. There was no point in hurting him with my hands any more than necessary. He weakly tried to push me away, but the combination of fear and pain left him without much of a chance. Keeping my eyes on the clock above my desk, we don't want to miss the time, do we? I savored the feel of my fists in his stomach. He gasped, bent over, trying only to move away from me. When there were only 10 seconds left, I suddenly stopped and took a step back. He tried to straighten up, thinking I was done, and I landed 2 quick punches right on his nose, followed by a powerful right punch just below his left eye. He fell to the floor howling in pain and rolled to his knees. I went to the door and let Dolly in, looking even more frightened than before. I told her to get Steve a wet rag. 10 minutes later I pushed him out the door. He was still holding the rag over his bleeding face and said, "How the hell am I going to explain this to Claire? It's not my problem, Steve. Have a good night." Taking Dolly's hand, I led her back to the study and sat her down. I'd never seen her like this before. She was trembling with terror. "It's all right, Dolly, I'll never hit you. You don't need to be afraid." "God, Jack, what's got into you? How could you do that to Steve?" I looked at her with some surprise. "Don't you really understand, Dolly? Don't you realize that what he did to you, what he did to me, is vicious and wrong?" She blushed. Yes, of course. It's just, well, you're so mad, it's like you've lost your mind." I had nothing to say to that, so I was silent for a minute. "Dolly, I told you I'm not divorcing you. But our marriage, damn it, it's not going to be the same. From now on, it's gonna be different. Do you understand me?" "Of course I do, Jack. I'll do anything to make up for what I've done to you." She looked at me pleadingly. "All right," I said. "Let's start with a couple of conditions. You find a new job within 2 weeks, I won't let you see Steve every day at work anymore. Hopefully, this should be obvious, and you will never have any personal contact with Steve ever again. No touching, no kissing, no sex, no phone calls, no emails, nothing. Next. If our marriage is to continue, it will be on a completely different basis. I am no longer willing to put up with your bad moods, your coldness and indifference. I expect you to be a cheerful, kind and loving wife. Every day you will show by your behavior that you love me and are grateful to be married to me. And all that wild, unbridled sexuality you've only shared with Steve, I expect you to share it with me now. I look forward to seeing you in sexy lingerie I've never seen you wear, the one hidden in the depths of your drawer." I looked at her meaningfully, and she lowered her eyes in shame. "And I expect you to be ready, willing and impatient when I want to have sex. If you really love me, Dolly, you've got a hell of a lot of lost time to make up for." She walked across the room and knelt down at my feet, wrapping her arms tightly around my legs and looking up at me. "I love you, Jack, more than I can express. And I'll show you how much, I promise." I looked at her pale face, tear-stained, at her frightened eyes. Somewhere inside me there were remnants of the love and devotion I had felt for this woman with whom I had shared so much. But they were overshadowed, reduced to nothing by my anger at her selfishness and hypocrisy. She deserved everything she was supposed to get. I pretended to soften a little. "Listen, Dolly," I said more gently. "Your big social dinner is in 4 weeks. Let's use those weeks to make a fresh start, to make our marriage something new, maybe even better. If all goes well, the dinner will be our chance to celebrate the success of our new endeavor. What do you say?" She nodded at me, wrapping her arms more tightly around my legs. "Yes, Jack, thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. And I'll be everything you want me to be." I pulled her to me, and she kissed my lips and face again and again, crying. Now give me 10 minutes to clean myself up a little, and then I'll start making it up to you, she said, standing up and smiling. She left the room and I leaned back in my chair, grinning to myself. Watching Dolly twist herself into a pretzel trying to please me for the next 4 weeks was going to be a lot of fun. I was a little surprised that she didn't notice what I didn't. I didn't ask her anything about the affair, how it had started and so on. Probably the whole evening had been such a shock to her that she hadn't had time to think about it. But of course I didn't ask, because I just didn't care. I was done with Dolly, she just didn't know it yet. When I entered the bedroom a few minutes later, the bed was made, the lights were dimmed, and Dolly was lying on her side in an incredibly revealing red nightgown. It barely reached her hips, and through the front panels I could clearly see her beautiful breasts and everything that would normally be hidden under her panties. She had washed her face, combed her hair and fixed her makeup. She looked amazing, as beautiful as ever. She looked very excited too, and I noticed there was a bottle of lube on the bedside table. "There you are," she said in a sexy voice, but with a slight tremor in her voice. "Come to Mummy." She held out her arms to me, and I quickly pulled off my clothes and hugged her. We started kissing, her body was hot, and she wriggled like a snake. Whether it was genuine arousal or pure play, I enjoyed it. I found that I was quite capable of putting aside the rage and disgust I felt for Dolly and immersing myself in the pleasure of sex with her. She had a beautiful body and her impatience was arousing, especially after so many years of indifference. I enjoyed what we were doing, and even to my rough and direct demands she responded responsively and willingly. In the last 6 years of our marriage, such words on my part would have earned an angry rebuke and an end to all sexual play for the night. Things were different now. I'd had the dubious pleasure of seeing on video how skilled at sex Dolly could be, and now I was the master of those talents for what I thought was the first time in my life. Basically, I didn't care about her pleasure, but she seemed to enjoy it as much as I did. When we were done, after tidying herself up in the bathroom, she turned off the light and snuggled up to me under the covers. She gently kissed my neck and said, "Sleep well." As I fell into a satisfied sleep, I looked forward to receiving the same attention for the next 4 weeks. I really enjoyed the following weeks as Dolly put all her energy into rebuilding our marriage. The next morning she woke me up with a cheerful smile and a loving kiss, asking if I wanted to get a quickie before scrambled eggs and bacon. I let that pass my ears but enjoyed my breakfast, watching with interest as Dolly did more work than usual to prepare the children for their days. That evening I came home to eat an unusual meal, the recipe for which Dolly had found in a cookbook and decided to try cooking. Marilyn and Brendan, who demanded hot dogs, macaroni and cheese, didn't like it, but I did. And Dolly took the lead in getting the kids bathed and to bed on time so the two of us could enjoy our evening. Our nocturnal fiddling in the bedroom was a pleasant variation of the previous night. Despite my secret feelings, I couldn't help but notice that we behaved like two happy newlyweds. Day after day Dolly's loving attention never waned. She was cheerful and obliging in the mornings and with the children, and became a tigress in the bedroom in the evenings. In every way my life had become like a happy fantasy. Except, of course, that I no longer trusted my wife one iota, that beneath my happy submission to her attentions, I was full of rage, and that I was only pretending to share her loving feelings. For all I knew, she was only pretending too. Steve's signed papers were in my mailbox within 48 hours, as I had requested. I quickly got Dolly to sign the adoption consent and took it to my lawyer. That same week he arranged a private hearing in front of a judge, in which I explained why I was applying to adopt children who were apparently mine, and 10 days after that the legal adoption was finalized. Then my lawyer got busy with the divorce paperwork. One morning at work I had an unexpected visit from Jennifer Bressett, a colleague with whom I occasionally share projects. At 28 years old, she was 5 years younger than me, and she was a real knockout. I knew she was divorced, and from time to time her remarks to me as she walked through the office seemed a little flirtatious, but I never thought much of her except that she was pretty much number one on my list of women I sleep with in my fantasies. I expected Jennifer's visit to be work-related, but it wasn't. "Jack," she said, what's changed about you lately? Have you been working out? You seem, I don't know, younger or in better shape or something. Thanks for the compliment, Jennifer, I said with a smile. Then, thinking, what the hell, I rushed on. Something else entirely, actually, but I can't talk about it here. Maybe we could have lunch together today? That sounds great, she replied. We went to a salad bar, then took our lunches to a table in the park and enjoyed the sunshine while we ate. The difference in me that you noticed is probably that my marriage is in a terrible state. She looked puzzled. And that makes you look better. Explain, please. I gave her a carefully edited version of the story. A couple of weeks ago, I found out that my wife was cheating on me with a guy from her work. This has been going on for a long time. I gave him a few gentle lessons with my fists to get him to leave her alone, and since then she's been doing her best to make it up to me. I'll tell you a secret, Jennifer, Dolly thinks she can get me back, but I've already decided that I won't be with her in a few weeks. I can't live with a woman who betrayed me like that. In the meantime, she treats me like a king both in and out of the bedroom. That's the difference you noticed today. She looked at me appraisingly. I'm impressed that you're doing so well. When I found out my ex was fucking someone else, I almost fell apart. It took a few months before my sanity returned to me. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't know you were going through this just now. But for now, I've taken control of my situation. It's going to unfold the way I want it to, not someone else. It makes me feel so much better. Saying, what the hell, to myself again, I added, one of the nice things about my situation is that although I'm not officially single yet, I know I will be soon. So I don't have to hold back from expressing my admiration for the very lovely lady sitting with me in the park today. And I was looking at her, smiling. She blushed slightly and looked away, then looked at me again. God, Jack, you've managed to embarrass me. I didn't think it was that easy. I'm sorry, Jennifer, but you're so beautiful and so much fun. I've been attracted to you ever since we met, it's just been forbidden to talk about it until now. Is there any chance you could have dinner with me on Saturday? I know a nice Italian place overlooking the river. She looked at me very seriously. Jack, I like you, too, and you've always been easy to be with. Can I trust you? Is your marriage really over? Or is this just some bullshit to get up my skirt? Forgive me, but I've seen this scene before. Jennifer, I've always been straight with you, and as you know, I've never hit on you before. I'm splitting up with Dolly in about a fortnight and filing for divorce the same day. There's no going back. But I understand if you want to push me away, I'll just be a little disappointed. She smiled. No, Jack. Now that you've made me an offer, I'm ready to accept it before you change your mind. She looked at me intently, and I leaned forward, after a little hesitation, and we kissed, lightly and gently. It wasn't a hot sexy kiss, but it felt like a wonderful promise. When it was over, I smiled at her like a happy child. When I told my wife that I had a date on Saturday night, it certainly brought out the bastard in me. I made it clear that I would be out with another woman and that I expected her to stay home with the kids. Jack. Dolly was shocked and seemed ready to cry. But I've tried so hard, think of something to save our marriage. How can you see someone else? It's very simple, Dolly. Not only did you see someone else, you slept with him behind my back for 6 whole years. You've been on terrific behavior lately, and I'm feeling much better, but that doesn't mean you've earned my complete loyalty. It seems pretty obvious that I'm going to have sex with someone else for quite a while before you and I are even. She started to cry a little. Are you going to sleep with her? No, but I can. And that's just something you're gonna have to deal with. If it makes you feel awful, well, it'll help you understand how you made me feel. And with that, I ended the conversation by walking out of the room. My first dates with Jennifer were delightful, but cautious. We took our time, both of us perhaps feeling that we had more than just sexual attraction for each other. We chatted and laughed, complained about our colleagues, told stories about growing up and just getting to know each other. It was comfortable, easy. It even sometimes reminded me of my first days with Dolly. A thought that saddened me, but I pushed it away. After our third dinner, as I was opening Jennifer's car door outside her flat, she asked quietly, "Don't you want to come in?" We both knew what that meant and I was instantly turned on. When we got inside, she was immediately in my arms and we kissed and hugged like two teenagers. She pulled away from me a little and said seriously, "I really want to do this, Jack, but I'm really nervous. It's been a long time. Please, be gentle with me and take your time." "Of course," I said with a smile, gently lifting her into my arms. "Which way is your bedroom?" Sex with Jennifer was amazing, but totally different from the vigorous fucking I'd been having with Dolly lately. She was very horny, but a little shy. She was quite passive at first, letting me stroke and caress her. But she was so gorgeous that I savored every bit of her. I teased her with my lips and hands for a long time, only very gradually increasing the intensity. It excited me like crazy when her breathing quickened to short gasps and I continued, bringing her to what sounded like a very pleasurable ecstasy. She shuddered and cried out before relaxing on the bed and pulling me into her arms. "Wow, Jack. I was really nervous, and you were, too. Just perfect. God, that felt good." Our first sex was relaxed, soft, tender. It was infinitely more loving than the athletic sex I'd had with Dolly. In fact, it was like watching two people who care about each other enjoy each other. When we were done, Jennifer kissed me several times and asked if I could stay the night. I happily agreed and we fell asleep in each other's arms. The next morning she was a little embarrassed again and we didn't make love, but we said goodbye with sincere tenderness and kissed each other gently several times. My big wedding night with Dolly was only a few days away. I didn't reveal my plans to Jennifer, but I told her that I would be officially divorced very soon and was on my way to divorce. When I walked in the door around 9:30 a.m. that Saturday morning, Dolly was crying quietly at the kitchen table. She understood how I had spent the previous night. Pretending to sympathize with her more than I felt, I hugged her gently. "I'm sorry, Dolly, I know how you feel, believe me. God, Jack, it's just awful. The very thought of you in another woman's bed tears me apart. I've been so selfish all these years. How could I not think of you and how my affair would make you feel?" She looked at me and said, thank you for giving me another chance." Dolly's great evening, like mine, was fast approaching. In some ways I almost regretted it. The last 4 weeks with Dolly, including some very arousing sex, had been a lot of fun, and I would miss them. But the thing was, nothing she had done had even begun to cool my resentment and anger. Her utter betrayal went far beyond what she could do to make amends. When I looked into my heart, there was only a tiny thimbleful of love for her and only a tiny drop of sympathy for what was about to happen to her. While working with her on the presentation for her talk, I also secretly prepared my own version, not exactly the one she saw, as I needed to hide Steve's identity and the fact that he was the father of the children. But the general approach was the same: first a series of candid photos, without showing Steve's face, and then some marvelous videos. The first clip showed Dolly doing a striptease for her lover and then falling to her knees in response to his command. This was followed by a clip of Dolly grunting while riding her boyfriend. Then I inserted a fragment of a carefully edited conversation between a naked Dolly and her invisible lover. "As long as I keep giving him a little sex now and then, he'll never suspect a thing." And he replied, "And aren't you giving him too much, baby? Your pussy belongs to me." I had set up the laptop so that Dolly's presentation would play every time she used it. But by pressing a combination of keys, including, of course, I could lock her presentation and replace it with my own special file. Both in the days leading up to the dinner and that evening, Dolly asked me fearfully if I had deleted that awful file that had played for her 4 weeks ago. Each time, with a loving smile, I assured her that it was gone, and I went to my laptop and showed her that her presentation was there and would play at the touch of a button. The last few days at home had been especially sweet. Dolly was beginning to feel more confident that she was winning me over again, and her loving attention seemed increasingly calm and somehow less desperate. At the same time, the pain she felt when I spent the whole night with Jennifer made her climax even higher in our bed. She fucked me half to death and I even had to turn her down once or twice. Knowing it was all about to end, I savored every moment of it. When the grand evening came, we were there early, me in a rented dinner jacket, Dolly looking glamorous in a thin strapless black evening dress that revealed her neck and shoulders. We ran her PowerPoint presentation through it twice, so she was sure everything was in order. As she bent over to put her purse under the podium, I quickly typed in a combination of keys ending in A. Everything was in place. And it went exactly as I had envisaged. We had a good dinner, chatting amicably with our friends at the table. A few boring greetings followed, then the outgoing president warmly introduced Dolly and she nervously stepped to the podium to the sound of general applause. According to my watch, her excitement and happiness lasted exactly 54 seconds. That was the amount of time between the start of the PowerPoint file and the moment her audience began to see still pictures of her naked body with an anonymous penis sticking out of her various orifices. Dolly didn't freeze and knock over her water glass. But she turned and stared at me with horror and disbelief in her eyes before she desperately tried to stop the file from playing. She failed, of course. When the video clips started and the sound of them filled the room, she just stood there, slouched, red as a beetroot, staring at the floor. And she didn't make the slightest movement when the audience's surprise was replaced by outrage mixed with laughter, nor did she react in any way to the obscene shouts sent to her by someone in the departing crowd. In a few minutes we were alone. I sat looking at her quietly from my seat at the table. Finally she spoke a question from my imagination. "Jack. How could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." "I do, Dolly," I answered her. "I have loved you over the past few weeks just as you loved me 6 years before that." I walked over to the podium and placed several folded pieces of paper in her hand. "I'm divorcing you. Consider yourself served. If you stay in town you get joint custody of Marilyn and Brendan, otherwise I will fight you for full custody and you know I will win." Almost reaching the door, I heard her cry out in anger and pain, "But you said you wouldn't divorce me. You said, we could try to work things out." I turned round and looked at her. "Yes, Dolly, I did say that. I guess after all these years of you lying to me, I must have lied to you myself. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to rate the video and leave your comment.